Hey, this is Rob Minton and welcome back to another Cash Flow video. In this video, I want to share how you can have multiple pipelines of cash flow. And I really do think that it's helpful to think of cash flow as a pipeline, meaning you own something that provides you with ongoing monthly income or cash flow. The first time I started to think about owning pipelines was when I read John D. Rockefeller's biography many years ago. It's titled Titan, and I don't know, for whatever reason, this biography and John D. Rockefeller had a big impact on me. It may be because I live in Northeast Ohio and John Rockefeller got his start here in Cleveland, Ohio. He's actually buried here, so there's a lot of history of John D. Rockefeller here. But, the idea was that John wanted to own oil wells that were pumping oil into his business. And then maybe around the same time or a little bit after that, I ended up reading Kiyosaki's books, Robert Kiyosaki's books. And in one of his books, and I think it was The Cash Flow Quadrant, but I'm not positive, but he shares this story of a village. It's a small village. They do not have any water. So they hire two different people to bring water to the village. And the first person gets this big bucket and they drag the bucket down to the water source and then they drag it all the way back. And when they leave the water and then they go back, they keep going back and forth, hauling buckets of water back to the village. The second person disappears for a short period of time and then comes back with this plan to build a pipeline, right? So they create a pipeline, they connect it to the water source, and then water starts to flow 24/7 to the village. And that idea or that little story is helpful because it forces you to think, am I hauling buckets, which is, am I working for money? Having a job is the very same situation as hauling buckets because you can haul a bucket this week and get a paycheck, but you can't get another paycheck next week or next month unless you go haul another bucket. So we all have this same opportunity. Like, we could either continue hauling buckets or we could create a pipeline. And my suggestion is to create multiple pipelines, not just one. And the reason why is because you want to eliminate your dependency on one pipeline or one income stream. So if you are in a job and you're hauling buckets, there is a lot of risk. And that risk comes from either one, losing your job because of the economy, or your company is not doing well. So something outside of your control, right? Something happens which causes you to lose your job. And the second risk is that, let's say you get sick or you have a health problem and you can't work. So now you're unable to haul buckets, and that has a big impact on your family. The only way that you will ever be able to stop hauling buckets is to start adding pipelines of cash flow, okay? That's the only way. There are three ways that you can add pipelines. The first one is if you have a business, you can create pipelines in your business, or you can start a business that has multiple pipeline streams of cash flow. I have a small business, and that business has multiple pipelines of cash flow. You can invest in real estate. Every asset you acquire is a new stream of cash flow. Or you can invest in stocks that pay you, dividend stocks that pay you every single month for owning them. So you want to have all these pipelines pumping cash flow into your bank account. This idea of owning pipelines has two main responsibilities. The first one is you have to continuously be looking for new pipeline opportunities, new assets to acquire or new assets to create. And you also need to be maintaining your existing pipelines. So right now, as I'm recording this, I have a couple of vacancies in my rental properties, which means I have pipelines that are no longer pumping oil, right? No longer pumping cash flow. And whenever I have this situation, it becomes a very timely matter for me. That's because it's very expensive when one of your pipelines is down. So let's say hypothetically that you have a rental property and that property provides $2,000 of monthly cash flow or revenue or rent, right? You could take that $2,000, divide it by 30 days, and it's $67 a day that you're losing because that pipeline is down. And I know $67 isn't a lot of money, but it compounds day after day. So a vacancy for me becomes kind of an urgent matter where I want that vacancy filled as quickly as possible because I want to get that pipeline pumping oil and cash flow again. But I'm also concerned about the opportunity cost of not having that pipeline pumping. So if, let's say I have a vacancy for 2 months, that's $4,000. That $4,000 could have been used to buy additional assets. And I lose out on all of those additional assets if I don't have that pipeline up and running. And the crazy part about this idea of owning pipelines is that several years ago, Dan Kennedy and I, and if you don't know Dan, he's written, 20, 30 books. He's one of the best copywriters in the world. One of my mentors, I learned so much from him. I actually had a chapter in one of his books, but we had a seminar here in the Cleveland area. Dan's actually in Cleveland. We had real estate professionals from across North America fly in, and during this seminar, we were teaching different strategies. And in one of Dan's presentations, he talked about owning oil wells. So I thought it would be cool to share part of what Dan taught in that seminar with you about owning oil wells.
I find myself working with people not just about how to make money, but about how we make the money. Whatever you want to call that, lifestyle issues, lifestyle preferences. I find that most people in most businesses, and all of us early, but then most people continuously, make massive trade-offs for high income. For a high six-figure or a seven-figure income, they feel like they have to trade away pretty much everything. And depending upon our age, some of us in the room, certainly, we were raised literally and conditioned to believe the work-money link, that you don't get more money unless you do more work. There's a price tag attached to everything, and it actually turns out there isn't necessarily a price tag attached to everything. But the mindset of most people is to be willing to make all those trades. Quite frankly, it's no trick to make a lot of money. When I was in my 20s, I thought it was magic and miraculous. And in my 40s and 50s, I've just gradually come to the realization that if you're willing to make any kind of trade imaginable, making $1 million or $2 million a year is not any big tough proposition. But making it in a way that is pleasing to you and satisfactory to you and preserves your time and control of your life and your sanity and all of that. Now that's a magic trick. Very few people ever figure that out. They usually trade and trade and trade and trade and trade for the big money until their aorta blows out. That's pretty much the program. And so this is as much about how you want to make money as it is about money. Jobs produce income, businesses produce equity. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily the kind of equity where the 30th year or the 20th year you sell the company. And that's what most people think of when they think in terms of equity. I simply mean by equity that the business makes money for you versus the job where you make money for it. And so the question is, what are you putting in place that makes money for you? I'll give you an analogy that I'll use a number of times this morning. And it is the difference between being a worker in the oil industry and owning oil wells. And most people in sales businesses are workers in the oil industry, meaning you show up, you work on the oil rig, you pump oil out of the ground and you get paid for it. The owner of the oil well doesn't have to show up every day. The oil well pumps whether he goes and manually pumps it or not. I spoke for 9 years on a program with Zig Ziglar. And if you've ever seen Zig, since the beginning of time, Zig hauls this giant pump around with him on stage, and he does this little shtick about priming the pump. And he's got this pump, and he stands there pumping this pump. I saw him do it for the first time when I was 14. It actually occurred to me when I was 14. The whole story about having to prime the pump every day, it dawned on me, it occurred to me, what happens if you got like 8 days where you don't feel like pumping? And for most salespeople, that's a disaster because they don't own an oil well. They're pumpers. This is about making the transition from a job to a business that has real equity, where you actually own oil wells that pretty much on their own can pump out revenue.
Pretty cool, huh? So if you want to get into this game of owning oil wells and having multiple streams of cash flow or multiple pipelines of cash flow, I would rush down below, sign up for my free course below where I detail my secret asset multiplication plan. And when I say secret, I really do mean secret. This was the plan that I had worked on for many years. I never really shared it publicly. And it's super powerful because it's designed to allow you to turn one asset into multiple assets without having to keep investing money out of your pocket. Sign up for that class. It's free. There's no agenda. There's no sales pitch in it. It's just a really cool course that will, I think, allow you to make a lot more money with your real estate investments. Well, I hope this video was helpful, and I will catch you in the next one.